The sun was setting over the Dakota Territory, casting long shadows across the rolling plains as Nathaniel Dawson rode into town clutching her small satchel of belongings, desperately hoping this remote settlement of Cottonwood Springs might be far enough from her past to start anew. The year was 1878, and the West was still wild enough to hide in, yet civilized enough that a single woman might find honest work if she had the will. The small frontier town looked much like dozens of others sprouting across the territory, a main street lined with wooden buildings. A general store, saloon, and modest church steeple rising above the dusty thoroughfare. As Nathaniel dismounted from the stagecoach, stretching her legs after the long journey, she noticed something unusual across the street. A tall man with broad shoulders stood outside the general store, a tiny infant cradled awkwardly against his chest, his expression a mixture of determination and absolute desperation. Nathaniel had promised herself she wouldn't get involved in other people's troubles. Her plan was simple: secure a job as a seamstress or perhaps at the local boarding house, keep to herself, and build a quiet life far from Boston and the scandal that had driven her west. Yet something about the man's struggle, the way he bounced the crying child while simultaneously trying to gather supplies, stirred something in her she thought had died months ago. The storekeeper's voice carried across the street. "Mr. Calloway, that little one needs more than you can give her. You ought to send word to your relatives back east." "I told you before, Hiram, Emily has no one but me now," the man replied, his voice low but firm. The baby's cries grew louder, a desperate wail that seemed to pierce Nathaniel right to her core. Before she could reconsider, she found herself crossing the street, drawn by an instinct she couldn't name. "Excuse me," she said, approaching cautiously. "That child sounds hungry." The man turned, revealing a face weathered by sun and grief, yet handsome beneath several days' worth of stubble. Deep blue eyes regarded her with suspicion. "I don't recall asking for your assessment, madam," he said, though there was more exhaustion than rudeness in his tone. "I'm Nathaniel Dawson," she said, ignoring his gruffness. "I have experience with infants. Your daughter needs milk, not that sugar water I see you trying to feed her." The man Calloway studied her face. The baby continued to wail, tiny fists clenched in frustration. "Jesse Calloway," he finally offered, "and this is Emily." His expression softened slightly when he looked at the infant. "Her mama died 3 days ago, childbed fever." The simple statement carried the weight of an avalanche. Nathaniel knew what it meant for a child to lose her mother, and for a man to lose his wife in such a way. The West was unforgiving to women in childbirth, even more so when proper medical care was days away. "I'm sorry for your loss, Mr. Calloway," Nathaniel said, "but that baby needs proper nourishment. Do you have a cow? Goat's milk would be better for an infant." "Got a milk cow at my homestead," he replied, "but I can't seem to get the milk into her proper. She just cries and turns away." Nathaniel hesitated only a moment. She had promised herself no entanglements, yet here was a child in need and a man clearly in over his head. "I can help," she said simply, "at least show you how to feed her correctly." Jesse Calloway's eyes narrowed. "Why would you do that? You don't know me from Adam." It was a fair question. Nathaniel adjusted her bonnet, buying time to consider her answer. "Because that baby deserves a fighting chance, Mr. Calloway, and you look like you haven't slept in days." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. 3 days to be exact. "Let me help," Nathaniel repeated. "Just with the feeding, then I'll be on my way." Jesse looked down at his daughter, then back at Nathaniel. Something in his expression shifted pride giving way to pragmatism. "My place is 5 miles out of town," he said. "Can you ride?" "I grew up riding," she replied, though she didn't elaborate that her riding had been done on manicured paths in Boston parks, not the wild Dakota plains. Within the hour, Nathaniel found herself riding beside Jesse Calloway, her hastily purchased supplies tucked into saddlebags, the baby now strapped securely to his chest in a makeshift sling. She had only intended to give him advice in town, perhaps purchase proper bottles and show him how to use them. But the storekeeper had mentioned there was no wet nurse available in Cottonwood Springs, and the thought of leaving the infant without help had proven impossible. Just until the baby is feeding properly, she had told herself as she mounted the horse Jesse had arranged for her. Just a day or two. The Calloway homestead came into view as they crested a rolling hill, a sturdy cabin nestled in a small valley beside a stream, with corrals for livestock and the beginnings of what might someday be a prosperous ranch. It was modest but substantial, speaking to Jesse's determination and hard work. "It's not much," Jesse said, noticing her appraisal. "Started building it 2 years ago when Catherine and I came west. Meant to add on another room before winter for the baby," but his voice trailed off. "It's more than many have," Nathaniel replied kindly. "You've built something real here." Inside, the cabin was neat, but showed signs of recent neglect, understandable given the circumstances. A single main room served as kitchen and living area, with a small separate bedroom visible through an open door. The furnishings were simple but solid, including a handcrafted cradle near the stone fireplace. "I'll milk the cow," Jesse said, carefully handing Emily to Nathaniel. "There's clean water in the bucket by the door if you need it." Nathaniel cradled the infant, who had fallen into an exhausted sleep during the ride. Up close, she could see the baby was dangerously thin, her tiny features pinched with hunger. No more than 10 days old, if that. "We're going to fix this," she whispered to the sleeping child. "You just hold on a little longer." When Jesse returned with fresh milk, Nathaniel showed him how to prepare it properly, diluting it slightly and adding a small amount of sugar to make it more digestible for the newborn. "You need to warm it, but not too hot," she explained, testing drops against her wrist. "And you'll need proper bottles. I brought 2 from town, but you should get more." Jesse watched her movements with intense concentration, clearly committing every step to memory. When Nathaniel demonstrated how to hold Emily for feeding, how to angle the bottle just so, his large, calloused hands mimicked her movements with surprising gentleness. "Like this?" he asked, taking over the feeding. "Yes, that's perfect," Nathaniel said, watching as Emily finally began to suckle properly, her tiny throat working as she swallowed eagerly. "She needs to be fed every few hours, even through the night, and you'll need to burp her after." Relief washed over Jesse's features as he watched his daughter eat. In that moment, Nathaniel saw beneath the gruff exterior to the devoted father, beneath a man determined to keep his child alive, despite knowing almost nothing about infant care. "I don't know how to thank you, Miss Dawson," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "It's just Nathaniel," she said, "and you don't need to thank me. Any decent person would help." "Not many decent people find their way out here," Jesse replied, "mostly just folks running from something." The observation hit uncomfortably close to home. Nathaniel busied herself preparing a light meal from the supplies in Jesse's pantry, avoiding his perceptive gaze. As dusk fell, the practical matter of Nathaniel's departure became problematic. The baby needed feeding through the night, and riding back to town in darkness wasn't safe. "You can take the bedroom," Jesse offered. "Catherine's things I haven't had time to," he faltered. "The chair by the fire will be fine," Nathaniel insisted. "I'll help with the night feedings and ride back to town in the morning." But morning brought a fussy, fevered infant and dark clouds threatening rain. By unspoken agreement, Nathaniel's departure was postponed. She showed Jesse how to bathe Emily gently, how to check for rashes, how to swaddle her tightly for comfort. One day stretched into 2, then 3. Nathaniel sent word to town that she would need a few more days before seeking employment. Each time she prepared to leave, some new need arose. Emily wouldn't take the bottle from Jesse, or a sudden downpour made travel inadvisable, or Jesse needed help washing the baby's delicate clothes. In truth, Nathaniel found herself reluctant to go. The quiet routine of caring for Emily alongside Jesse had become a balm to her wounded spirit. Here, miles from anywhere, her past couldn't find her. More than that, she felt useful in a way she hadn't since before the scandal that had destroyed her reputation and driven her west. On the fifth day, as Nathaniel hung freshly washed diapers on a line while Emily slept peacefully in her cradle, Jesse returned from tending his small herd of cattle. "You're good with her," he said, removing his hat as he approached. "Better than I could ever be." "You're learning quickly," Nathaniel replied. "In another week you'll manage fine." Jesse's gaze was steady. "I can pay you to stay on as Emily's nurse." The offer caught Nathaniel off guard. "I'm not a nursemaid, Mr. Calloway." "It's just Jesse," he corrected, echoing her earlier words. "And I'm not looking for charity. It would be a proper arrangement. Room, board, and wages." Nathaniel pegged the last diaper to the line, considering. The position in town she'd hoped for assistant to the dressmaker would pay little and provide no housing. Here she would have purpose, security, and distance from curious eyes. "What about propriety?" she asked. "A single woman living in your home would cause talk." Jesse's jaw tightened. "Out here, 5 miles from anybody who's to talk. Besides, Emily needs you. He stopped himself. "Emily needs you," he repeated. That evening, after Emily was fed and sleeping, Nathaniel wrote 2 letters by lamplight. The first to the dressmaker in town, politely declining the position she'd inquired about. The second to her sister in Boston, letting her know she'd found a situation caring for an infant on a small ranch outside Cottonwood Springs. She carefully omitted that the arrangement included living under the same roof as a widower. Some details were better left unwritten. Days fell into a steady rhythm. Nathaniel cared for Emily while Jesse worked the ranch tending cattle, mending fences, preparing for the coming winter. In the evenings, they shared simple meals, Jesse recounting his day's work, Nathaniel reporting on Emily's progress. The baby grew stronger daily, her cheeks filling out, her cries becoming more demanding and healthy. Nathaniel found unexpected satisfaction in keeping the cabin, in cooking meals more elaborate than Jesse had been accustomed to. She began a small kitchen garden, using seeds from town and knowledge gleaned from books she'd read in her previous life. There was dignity in the work, in creating order and sustenance where grief had left chaos. Jesse, for his part, seemed to stand straighter with each passing week. The hollow look of desperation gradually faded from his eyes. He began to smile more first at Emily, then occasionally at Nathaniel when she said something unexpected or demonstrated yet another Eastern skill adapted to Western necessity. They settled into a cautious friendship built on shared concern for Emily. Jesse never asked about Nathaniel's past, and she offered no information beyond the basics. She was from Boston, had some education, and had come west seeking a fresh start. He, in turn, shared small pieces of his history, how he'd met Catherine when they were both working in Chicago, their dream of building a cattle ranch in the Territory, the hard journey west, and the backbreaking work of the first year. "Catherine loved it here," he told Nathaniel one evening as they sat on the porch, Emily sleeping against his chest. "Even when the winter came and the snow piled higher than the windows, she said she could breathe out here, really breathe for the first time." "I understand that feeling," Nathaniel said softly. "There's a clarity to this place." Jesse studied her face in the fading light. "What were you running from, Nathaniel?" The direct question startled her. For a moment, she considered deflecting, as she had whenever the conversation veered toward her past, but something in Jesse's straightforward gaze made dissembling seem pointless. "Disgrace," she said simply. "I was engaged to a man from a prominent family when I discovered he had improper relationships with several young women. I broke the engagement. He retaliated by spreading rumors that I had been the unfaithful one." She looked out across the darkening plains. "In Boston, reputation is everything for a woman. My father believed him over me. I became unwelcome in the homes where I'd once been welcomed, so I left." Jesse was quiet for a long moment. "People are quick to judge what they don't understand," he finally said. Out here, most folks are too busy staying alive to worry about gossip. Is that why you came west? Nathaniel asked. A shadow crossed his face. Partly. Catherine's family didn't approve of me, a farmer's son with big ideas, but mostly we came because we wanted to build something that was truly ours. He looked down at Emily. I promised Catherine I'd make this work, make this place into something she could be proud of. The moment felt fragile, intimate in a way their daily interactions never were. Nathaniel stood abruptly. It's getting cold. We should take Emily inside. As summer faded toward autumn, the first real test of their arrangement came in the form of unexpected visitors. Jesse returned from town one afternoon with news that made Nathaniel's heart race. Reverend Whitman and his wife are riding out tomorrow, he said, hanging his hat on a peg by the door. They've been asking about you in town. Apparently Mrs. Whitman is concerned about your situation here. Nathaniel's hands stilled in the dough she was kneading. I see. I told them you were Emily's nurse, nothing more, Jesse continued, watching her reaction carefully. But they're coming to see for themselves. Of course, Nathaniel said, resuming her work with forced casualness. We have nothing to hide. Jesse crossed the room and leaned against the table, close enough that Nathaniel could smell the leather and sunshine on him. We don't, he agreed. But people see what they want to see. Mrs. Whitman is the sort who finds sin under every rock. Nathaniel pushed a strand of hair back with her flour-dusted wrist. Then we'll show them a proper household with clear boundaries. I'll sleep in the barn while they're here if necessary. Jesse's hand caught her arm gently. You will not sleep in the barn, he said firmly. This is your home now as much as it is mine and Emily's. We've done nothing wrong. The possessive weight of his hand on her arm, the intensity in his blue eyes as he declared the cabin her home, these things sent a flutter through Nathaniel that she immediately tried to suppress. This was an employment arrangement, nothing more. That she sometimes found herself watching Jesse as he worked, admiring the strength in his shoulders or the gentleness in his hands when he held Emily, was an indulgence she couldn't afford. Very well, she said, pulling her arm away. But perhaps we should be clear about our arrangement when they visit. I am Emily's nurse, hired to care for her, nothing more. A flash of something hurt, disappointment, crossed Jesse's face before his expression settled into neutral acceptance. Of course, he said, stepping back, nothing more. The Whitmans arrived the next morning, the Reverend tall and austere with a trimmed beard, his wife small and sharp-eyed in a severe black dress despite the warm day. Nathaniel had prepared the cabin meticulously, brewing coffee and baking fresh bread. She wore her most modest dress, her hair pulled back in a simple but proper style. Miss Dawson, Reverend Whitman greeted her, his tone carrying a hint of judgment. We've heard much about you in town. All good things, I hope, Nathaniel replied with a polite smile. Please come in. Jesse, Mr. Calloway is just finishing the morning chores. Mrs. Whitman's gaze swept the cabin, noting the neat arrangement, the curtains Nathaniel had sewn from flour sacks, the cradle positioned carefully by the fire. Her eyes lingered on the closed door to the bedroom. Such a cozy arrangement, she remarked. And where do you sleep, Miss Dawson? Before Nathaniel could answer, Jesse entered, having clearly hurried to make himself presentable. His hair was damp from washing, his shirt clean. Miss Dawson has the bedroom, he said without preamble. I take the cot by the fire. Coffee smells good, Nathaniel. The casual use of her first name didn't escape Mrs. Whitman's notice. Her lips pursed slightly. Mr. Calloway, she said, surely you understand the impropriety of this situation. A single woman living under the same roof as a widower, regardless of her supposed duties, invites speculation and scandal. Jesse's expression hardened. With all due respect, madam, out here we're more concerned with survival than speculation. Miss Dawson saved my daughter's life. Without her, Emily would have died. No one questions your need for help with the child, Reverend Whitman interjected, his tone more diplomatic than his wife's. But there are alternatives that would preserve Miss Dawson's reputation. She could live in town and visit daily, or you could hire a married couple to help with the ranch and household. 5 miles each way daily, through winter storms, Jesse countered. And married couples willing to work remote homesteads are scarce as hen's teeth in these parts, as you well know. The conversation grew increasingly tense as coffee was served. Nathaniel felt her carefully constructed new life threatening to unravel. If the Whitmans decided their arrangement was improper, word would spread. The very disgrace she had fled would find her again, only in a different form. "Perhaps," she said carefully, "there is a compromise. I understand your concerns about propriety, Mrs. Whitman. What if you were to visit regularly? See for yourselves that this is a respectable household." Mrs. Whitman seemed taken aback by the direct invitation. "Well, an excellent suggestion," Reverend Whitman said, looking relieved at the potential resolution. Regular pastoral visits would provide oversight and reassurance to the community. Jesse looked like he wanted to object but held his tongue. After further discussion and another cup of coffee, an agreement was reached. The Whitmans would visit once a month. Additionally, Jesse would bring Nathaniel and Emily to Sunday services when weather permitted, demonstrating their commitment to community and propriety. After the visitors departed, tension lingered in the cabin. Jesse stood at the window, watching the Whitmans' wagon disappear down the rough track toward town. "I'm sorry," Nathaniel said quietly. "I've brought complications to your life." Jesse turned, his expression unreadable. "You've brought life to this home, Nathaniel. Emily is thriving because of you. The garden is growing, the place feels." He paused, searching for words. "It feels like a home again, not just shelter." "Still," she persisted, "if my presence causes difficulties with the townspeople, to hell with the townspeople." Jesse interrupted, then immediately looked contrite. "Pardon my language, but I won't have small-minded gossip dictate how I care for my daughter." His vehemence surprised her. "Is that all it is, care for Emily?" The question hung between them, charged with unspoken possibilities. Jesse took a step toward her, then stopped as Emily began to cry from her cradle. "She needs changing," Nathaniel said, retreating to familiar territory, the moment whatever it had been past. The Whitmans' visit marked a turning point. Though their arrangement continued outwardly unchanged, subtle shifts occurred in the dynamics between Jesse and Nathaniel. Both became more conscious of maintaining appropriate distance, more careful about casual touches or prolonged conversations after Emily was asleep. Yet paradoxically, their forced propriety highlighted the growing attachment neither would acknowledge. Jesse found reasons to return to the cabin during the day, bringing Nathaniel wildflowers he claimed were for the table, asking her opinion on ranch matters that could easily have waited until evening. Nathaniel, in turn, began taking Emily to watch Jesse work when weather permitted, sitting in the shade of a cottonwood tree while he mended fences or worked with the cattle. Autumn arrived in earnest, bringing cooler nights and the urgency of winter preparations. Jesse worked longer hours, determined to complete necessary projects before the first snowfall. Nathaniel preserved garden produce, sewed warmer clothes for Emily from fabrics purchased in town, and began knitting a scarf for Jesse that she told herself was merely practical. On Sundays, as promised, they attended services in the small church when weather and Jesse's work allowed. Nathaniel felt the weight of curious stares, heard the whispers behind hands. But she held her head high, focusing on the comfort of familiar hymns and the solid presence of Jesse beside her, Emily growing heavier in his arms each week. After services, Jesse made a point of introducing Nathaniel properly to the townspeople, not as a servant or nurse, but as a valued member of his household. Some, like the storekeeper Hiram and his wife, were openly welcoming. Others maintained a polite distance, clearly reserving judgment. One Sunday in late October, as they prepared for the ride home after services, a woman approached Nathaniel while Jesse secured the horses. "Miss Dawson, I'm Clara Wilson. My husband runs the freight office." She was perhaps 40, with kind eyes and a practical manner. I wanted to tell you how wonderful Emily looks. When Mr. Calloway first brought her to town after his wife passed, we all feared the worst. She's strong, Nathaniel replied, smiling down at the now robust infant in her arms. She just needed proper care. Clara hesitated, then lowered her voice. I hope you don't mind my saying so, but Mr. Calloway seems transformed as well. After Catherine died, he was like a ghost himself. Now there's life in him again. She patted Nathaniel's arm. Don't let Agatha Whitman's disapproval trouble you. Most of us understand what it takes to survive out here, and it isn't always what Eastern sensibilities would prescribe. The woman's kindness brought unexpected tears to Nathaniel's eyes. Thank you, she managed. That means more than you know. On the ride home, Jesse noticed her thoughtful silence. Something happened in town. Nathaniel adjusted Emily's blanket against the chill wind. Mrs. Wilson spoke to me. She was kind. Clara's good people, Jesse agreed. Not everyone out here is looking to find fault. No, Nathaniel said, but enough are. The Whitmans are doing what they think is right, Jesse finished for her, and so are we. He looked straight ahead as he added, though sometimes I wonder if there might be a simpler solution to satisfy their concerns. What do you mean? Jesse remained focused on the trail ahead, his profile strong against the autumn landscape. Nothing, just thinking aloud. That night, after Emily was settled, Nathaniel sat by the fire working on Jesse's scarf while he reviewed his accounts at the table, tallying supplies needed for winter, calculating how many cattle he could afford to keep versus sell before the harsh weather arrived. We should have enough preserved food to last until spring, Nathaniel said, counting rows in her knitting. And I've put away extra milk for Emily in case the cow's production drops. Jesse looked up, his expression somber in the lamplight. You're always thinking ahead. Catherine was like that too. The comparison startled Nathaniel. Jesse rarely mentioned his late wife except in general terms. I'll take that as a compliment, she said carefully. It is. Jesse set down his pencil. Catherine would have liked you. She always said she wished for a sister or close friend out here, someone who understood what it meant to leave everything familiar behind. Nathaniel's hands stilled on her knitting. I think I would have liked her too. Jesse rose and came to stand near the fire, his tall frame casting long shadows across the cabin floor. I've been thinking about what Reverend Whitman said about alternatives. A cold fear settled in Nathaniel's stomach. Are you asking me to leave? No, Jesse said quickly, turning to face her. God, no, I'm asking, he broke off, running a hand through his hair in a gesture of frustration. This is harder than I thought it would be. Nathaniel set her knitting aside and stood, confused by his agitation. Jesse, what are you trying to say? He took a deep breath. The Whitmans and their kind would stop their talk if you weren't my employee living under my roof, but my wife. The word hung in the air between them. Nathaniel felt as if the floor had suddenly tilted beneath her feet. Your wife, she repeated. You can't be serious. I am entirely serious, Jesse said, his voice gaining confidence. It makes practical sense. You're already caring for Emily as if she were your own. We work well together. The ranch is becoming productive enough to support a family. Practical sense. Nathaniel echoed, an unexpected pain blooming in her chest. You're proposing marriage as a business arrangement, Jesse frowned. That's not what because if that's all it is, Mr. Calloway, I must decline, Nathaniel continued, her voice growing sharper. I left Boston to escape one loveless arrangement. I won't enter another, even for convenience's sake. Nathaniel, you're not understanding me, Jesse protested, stepping closer. I understand perfectly, she said, moving toward the bedroom. Good night, Mr. Calloway. She closed the door firmly behind her, leaning against it as tears threatened. Of course Jesse didn't love her. How could he, when his heart was still bound to Catherine? What a fool she'd been to imagine the growing warmth between them was anything more than gratitude and proximity. On the other side of the door, Jesse stood motionless, cursing his clumsy words. He hadn't meant to make it sound so cold, so practical. But how could he tell her that in the month since she'd arrived, she had become as essential to him as air? That he found himself watching her with Emily, memorizing the graceful movements of her hands, the way sunlight caught in her hair. That he lay awake at night on his cot, listening to her soft breathing from the bedroom, imagining a future where the distance between them was closed forever. The next morning brought strained politeness. Nathaniel focused on Emily, avoiding direct conversation with Jesse. He departed earlier than usual for his day's work, the set of his shoulders communicating hurt and confusion. As the day progressed, Nathaniel's anger gave way to more complex emotions. Had she misunderstood Jesse's intentions? His words had been about practicality, yes, but there had been something in his eyes that spoke of deeper feelings unexpressed. By midday, a new complication arose. Dark clouds gathered on the horizon, and the wind picked up with unusual ferocity. Nathaniel recognized the signs of an approaching storm, not uncommon in autumn, but potentially dangerous. Jesse had mentioned riding to the north pasture to check on stray cattle. He would be hours from the cabin when the storm hit. As the first fat raindrops struck the roof, Nathaniel's worry grew. By mid-afternoon, the storm had become a deluge, wind howling around the cabin corners, thunder shaking the windows. Emily was fretful, sensing the tension. Still, Jesse had not returned. When the light began to fade without any sign of him, Nathaniel made a difficult decision. She couldn't leave Emily alone to search, but neither could she ignore the possibility that Jesse might be injured or lost in the storm. She secured the cabin, prepared a lantern, and positioned it in the window, a beacon, in case he was trying to find his way home in the darkness. As night fell completely, bringing with it driving rain that turned occasionally to sleet, Nathaniel paced the cabin floor with Emily. Every sound of the storm became a potential horse's hoofbeat, every gust of wind against the door a possible knock. "He's fine," she told Emily, as much to convince herself as soothe the baby. "Your father knows this land. He'll take shelter if necessary." But as the hours passed with no sign of Jesse, fear took deeper root. Nathaniel found herself praying real, desperate prayers, unlike the formal recitations of her Boston upbringing. She bargained with God, promising anything if only Jesse would return safely. It was well past midnight when she heard the unmistakable sound of a horse approaching, followed by heavy footsteps on the porch. Nathaniel rushed to the door. Emily clutched to her chest and pulled it open. Jesse stood there, drenched and mud-splattered, his face pale with cold and exhaustion. Without a word, Nathaniel pulled him inside, her free arm going around his waist to support him as he stumbled. "Thank God," she whispered. I know," Jesse said, his voice rough. "The creek flooded, had to take the long way back." He reached out to touch Emily's cheek with a trembling hand. "You're both all right. We're fine," Nathaniel assured him. "But you're freezing. We need to get you warm." Working quickly, she settled Emily in her cradle, then helped Jesse remove his sodden coat and boots. She built up the fire, heated water for coffee, and found dry clothes. All the while, Jesse watched her with an intensity that made her skin warm despite the chill in the cabin. "You were worried about me," he said as she handed him a steaming cup. "Of course I was worried," Nathaniel replied, unable to maintain the morning's coolness in the face of her relief. "Emily needs you." Jesse set the cup aside untouched. "And you, Nathaniel, do you need me too?" The directness of the question caught her off guard. In the flickering firelight, with the storm still raging outside and the fear of losing him still fresh, Nathaniel found she couldn't dissemble. "Yes," she admitted softly. "I need you too." Jesse closed the distance between them, his hands coming up to frame her face. "I made a mess of things yesterday. When I talked about marriage making practical sense, I didn't say the most important part." Nathaniel's heart quickened. "What part was that?" "That I love you," Jesse said simply. "That I've been falling in love with you since the day you showed up with milk for my starving child. That I wake up every morning grateful you're here, not just for Emily's sake, but for mine." Tears welled in Nathaniel's eyes. I thought you were still in love with Catherine." "I'll always honor Catherine's memory," Jesse said, his thumbs gently wiping away Nathaniel's tears. "She gave me Emily, but loving her doesn't mean I can't love you now differently but just as truly." "I love you too," Nathaniel whispered. "I tried not to. I told myself it was just gratitude for giving me a home, a purpose, but it's more than that." Jesse's smile transformed his weary face. "Then marry me, Nathaniel Dawson, not for propriety's sake, not to silence gossip, but because we belong together, you, me, and Emily. Be my wife because we love each other." In answer, Nathaniel rose on tiptoe and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was tender at first, then deepened as months of unacknowledged longing found expression. Jesse's arms went around her, pulling her close, and Nathaniel felt as if she'd finally found her true home. They were married 2 weeks later in the small church in Cottonwood Springs. The ceremony was simple, attended by the handful of townspeople who had shown kindness to Nathaniel and respect for Jesse. Emily, dressed in a christening gown Nathaniel had sewn from one of her own petticoats, gurgled happily in Clara Wilson's arms as her father and new mother exchanged vows. Even Mrs. Whitman seemed mollified by the respectability of the occasion, though she couldn't resist commenting that the marriage might have occurred a bit sooner to avoid any appearance of impropriety. "Some things can't be rushed," Jesse replied with a smile that was polite but firm. "Finding the right partner is worth taking time to be certain." The first winter, as a family, brought challenges and joys in equal measure. Heavy snows sometimes isolated the ranch for weeks at a time. Emily cut her first tooth, learned to sit up, and began to babble sounds that occasionally resembled "mama," a word that never failed to bring tears to Nathaniel's eyes. Jesse expanded the cabin as he had once promised Catherine, adding a proper bedroom for Emily and enlarging the main living area. Nathaniel hung curtains, braided rugs, and created a home that blended Eastern comforts with Western practicality. When spring finally arrived, bringing with it the miracle of green grass and wildflowers across the plains, Jesse and Nathaniel rode together to a hilltop overlooking the ranch, Emily secure in her father's arms. "Look there," Jesse said, pointing to the valley where their cabin stood. "By next year, I'll have twice as many cattle. In 5 years, this could be one of the most prosperous ranches in the territory." Nathaniel followed his gaze, seeing not just the present reality but the future he envisioned. "It's going to be wonderful," she agreed, "but it already is, you know." "We already have everything that matters." Jesse looked at her, the love in his eyes as clear as the spring sky above them. "We do at that," he said softly, "and there's more coming." Nathaniel smiled, her hand drifting to her still flat stomach. They had only just confirmed the pregnancy, but already the new life growing inside her felt like a promise fulfilled. "Emily will be a wonderful big sister," she said. "Though I hope this one gives us a bit more warning of their arrival." Jesse laughed, the sound carrying across the open plains. "As long as you're here, we'll manage whatever comes." In the years that followed, the Calloway ranch indeed grew and prospered. Emily became a strong-willed, capable girl who adored her younger brother James and the twin sisters, Sarah and Elizabeth, who completed the family. Nathaniel never returned to Boston, finding in the Dakota Territory a freedom and purpose she could never have imagined in her previous life. Occasionally, usually at Christmas or when a new baby arrived, letters came from Nathaniel's sister in Boston. The scandal that had once seemed world-ending had faded to insignificance, replaced by news of mutual acquaintances and family events. Nathaniel read these connections to her past with interest, but without longing. Her life was firmly rooted in the West now, in the home and family she had built with Jesse. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Jesse presented Nathaniel with a gift, a finely crafted rocking chair for the porch, where she could sit and watch their children play in the yard that now boasted fruit trees and flower beds alongside the vegetable garden. "Not quite the luxury you grew up with in Boston," Jessie said as she ran her hand over the polished wood. Better, Nathaniel replied without hesitation. This was made with love. As they sat together on the porch that evening, watching the sunset paint the plains in gold and purple, their children's laughter drifting from inside where they played some elaborate game of their own invention, Jesse took Nathaniel's hand in his. "That day you rode into town," he said, "I was at the end of my rope. Emily was dying and I had no idea how to save her. I'd been praying for help, any kind of help. And I just happened to arrive on that day on that stagecoach," Nathaniel mused. "Some might call it coincidence." "I call it providence," Jesse said firmly. "You brought milk for my baby and stayed for my heart. Best bargain I ever made." Nathaniel leaned against his shoulder, contentment washing through her. From desperate beginnings, a widower with a starving infant, a woman fleeing scandal, they had forged something beautiful and enduring. The milk that had saved Emily's life had been just the beginning, the first connection in a lifetime of love that continued to deepen with each passing season. "The very best," she agreed, looking out at the land that had become her true home. In the soft light of the fading day, the ranch stretched before them, a testament to hard work, courage, and the power of love to transform what was broken into something whole and strong and lasting.